Hey, coming up on the show today, we have legendary music producer and engineer Ron Nevison. Some of the legends he's worked with include Kiss, The Who, Led Zeppelin, Ozzy Osbourne, Heart is what I meant, Damn Yankees, Vince Neil, Firehouse, Bad Company. The list goes on and on and on. He's also worked with legendary producer of his own right, Mike Clink, before that guy went on to work with Guns N' Roses. He's got tons of great stories from an amazing career. Stick around. There's so much to go over, but I want to just go over your whole career if we can in about an hour. I mean, you start as a singer, right? You start in a choir, and then you're a backup singer. Is that how it started, right?
Yeah. My third grade teacher told my mom that I had artistic kind of talent to send me to art school. So I went to Temple University, called the Tyler School of Fine Arts in Philly, where I grew up.
Okay.
And I did a semester on Saturdays drawing, and I heard them in the next room. I heard them singing, so I kind of graduated to the choir, and I became a soloist after a couple of years of soprano, because I was like 11, And by 12 or 13, I grew out of it. Didn't want to wear robes anymore. And so, I was singing in like hallways and in the subway, kind of like terminals with my little band. And we did a couple of gigs. A band called the Del Lords.
Okay, so then when do you start? Because then you start setting up PA systems for bands, and you kind of eventually become a roadie with Traffic and Derek and the Dominoes. So how do you go from that to roadie?
Yeah. I decided I wanted to maybe be a concert promoter. So I was working at this shop in Philly, selling bell bottoms, and the guy that owned the store, we went in together. He put up the money, and I promoted a Vanilla Fudge concert in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And one of the parts, the rider, I had to provide a sound system. I had to, my daughter, right? I had to hire a sound system. So I hired the festival group sound system, local place in Philly. And ended up, the concert didn't work out in terms of, like, we broke even. I made friends with Dave Hadler, the guy that ran the sound company, and he hired me. So then that started my audio career. Went from singer to going out, humping gear, and eventually worked myself up to front of house mixer.
So how did you initially get the thing for promoting Vanilla Fudge? Like, how did that come about? How did you?
Well, it was like a head shop. We were in 1967 or 68. We were right in the hub in Philly, right there in downtown, where all the hippies were. And it was that time, of a great time to be around. And I was a musician, and I was looking for some way to get into I even considered being a manager. I was going to go in a band. I was looking for a way in, and it just so happened that I got dragged into this festival group, and I also did lighting for them too. I did lighting, I did sound, and then I started doing big tours like Jefferson Airplane, Dirk and the Dominoes, Traffic, the Steve Winwood band, and that gave me, especially the English aspect, the Dirk and the Dominoes and Traffic. Those bands led to me going to England, because I was in a car with Chris Blackwell, who owns Island Records, and I was complaining about 3 years on the road, or 2 years, whatever it was, humping the gear, and getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night, even though I was a young guy. I was saying, I can't do this too much longer. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go into the studio and take what I've learned mixing and do it in the studio. He said, well, you can work for me, man. I really dig you. Come to London and I'll put you in at Island Studios. So that's how I made the transformation from live sound mixer to, I started at the bottom level in the studio, but I knew a lot. I knew a lot about microphones. I knew a lot about EQ and effects, a lot more than the average guy just walking in off the street at Island Studios.
That's a pretty big jump, though, to go from living. Were you still living in Philly at the time to go to London?
Yeah, it was, especially in 1970.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you have like a girlfriend or family that you just said, I'm going to London? I mean, that's huge.
It is. Yeah, I just decided to do it.
This was like your dream.
I had some friends, though. I had the roadie friends from Traffic and from Dirk and the Dominoes. I was good buddies with the keyboard player from the Dirk and the Dominoes. And
because were you only making $35 a week, American money, making tea at the beginning of all this, right? When you went to Island Studios?
How did you find that out?
I think you said it in an interview, and I was just like,
yeah, 15 pounds a week. I started. I don't know what that was, maybe $25 or $30.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 pounds a week for the flat and 10 pounds a week for whatever else.
But you were looking like forward. You knew that like if you had continued along this path in 6, 5, 10, whatever years, that you knew where you wanted to go.
It was an opportunity. And,
yeah.
I did blow it there. I mean, I worked at Island Studios for a while, but I got fired. I got fired for doing an unauthorized session over the weekend. So there was, I think it was Spooky Tooth or somebody, one of the bands that Island had, their engineer got sick over a weekend. They called me up, and I was a second engineer, and I wasn't supposed to go in and do that without letting them know. They called me up, and I went, okay, yeah, it was an opportunity. So I didn't think I'd get fired. I thought they'd like go, hey, you're not supposed to do that. But no, they fired me. And
dang.
So now I'm in London with no job. Now, but this leads to a very important being in a place where at this point, I had now kind of put in time at Island Studios and spent a couple of years mixing on the road. Now I answered an ad in Melody Maker magazine because I was jobless in London about this company that I knew nothing about, but it was called Track Plan. And the Track Plan was owned by Pete Townsend. And it was building studios for musicians. And I got that job. I got interviewed by a guy named John Alcock, who's a fellow producer engineer like myself. And my first project was to build a mobile studio, mobile, as they say, in an Airstream trailer. And that ended up being Ronnie Lane's Mobile Sound, LMS, still in use today. And that got called up for a bunch of gigs, like when Pete Townsend needed a control room because his studio wasn't finished to do the Quadrophenia album. He called up Ron. He said, "Get Nevison to bring the Airstream over here. We've got to start recording." So I started recording the Quadrophenia record. And when they moved into the studio, he liked what I was doing, so he kept me.
Right. Wasn't part of the story was that somebody was sick or drunk or something, didn't show up. And so they said, all right, we'll just have you do the whole album.
They had somebody that was, they had an engineer in mind for it that was, I think, drunk or something.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who that was, but they got me to, Pete wanted to do the Quadrophenia album in quadraphonic sound. And there was not a quadraphonic studio in London, which requires all the quad panners and all the routing and all of that stuff and speaker system for quad. So he built his own, but it wasn't ready. And he had to get started with recording Quadrophenia. But the studio part was finished, but the control room with the console wasn't finished. So we just pulled up the Airstream right outside the studio doors and started recording. And when the console was ready after 2 or 3 weeks, I just moved in there and continued. And then I did the Tommy film after that for The Who. So I did a couple of big projects for them.
So that's kind of your first big break in this.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
So there's
But
two really big breaks there. The sitting with Chris Blackwell and having a job offer to get to London, then getting fired and answering the ad in Melody Maker. Those were major breaks in my career.
For sure. So I mean, it must be somewhat surreal to watch The Who record. I mean, I know you've seen Derek and the Dominoes and you've seen all these other bands, perform and stuff, but to watch the recording of that classic album, I mean, that's got to be pretty cool, right?
Well, to watch anybody record, I was not experienced at all. I had spent very little time at Island Studios as a second, a T-boy, as you say. Actually, they call them tape ops.
Okay.
Tape operator.
Yeah. And then that one leads to the Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti, right?
Yeah. Well, they wanted, Zeppelin had this house they rented called Headley Grange, famous in rock lore. They had worked there previously with the Rolling Stones truck, the Rolling Stones mobile, with Houses of the Holy and other projects. So they knew what they wanted. They had been out there before, and we went out there to record what would be Physical Graffiti. And John Paul Jones had some problems. He couldn't turn up, or he didn't turn up, and Peter Grant, Zeppelin's manager, had signed Paul Rodgers and his band to do some demos, I think. Or he signed them as a band. And it was Mick Ralphs and Paul Rodgers. The guys would become known as Bad Company, but they didn't have a name. It was just Paul Rodgers' band. So we threw them at Headley Grange with me. And in 10 days, we did the Badco album. So that's how that worked out. And then I went back to do the Physical Graffiti album when Jonesy was ready to come back to the thing.
Yeah. So with Physical Graffiti, see, somebody told me, I want to say, I think I could be wrong on this. It might've been, I had producer Steve Thompson on. I feel like it was him or somebody said that Led Zeppelin was not very good live, that it was all these studio tricks, especially with Jimmy Page and the guitar. Do you agree with that? Or is that guy crazy?
Crazy.
So he was amazing in studio, like you're watching him in awe.
The thing that was amazing about them, there's a couple of amazing takeaways. One was how John Bonham played Jimmy's riffs. He didn't just do time. He played the exact riff. Doom 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 doom. If you listen through his Led Zeppelin stuff, he copped his riffs. That's what I think makes it so interesting. And he could do that because they were difficult, out of time, crazy time signatures. Jimmy, the genius guitar player that he was. The other thing, other takeaway was that they really didn't pay much attention to sound or, they never bugged me about getting they were never up my ass about getting perfect sounds. They just played. They just loved playing, and they knew what they wanted. They rehearsed ahead of time, so there was no clicks involved. They just played. And those were my two big takeaways from working with them, and pretty amazing. And now I didn't know until I finished working out at Headley Grange. They finished. They went in and obviously did work and mixing on the album. Did the strings on Kashmir and stuff like that. I do have an interesting little tidbit about Kashmir. When we recorded that track, I just had gotten an Eventide phaser that day, and somebody told me it sounded good on cymbals. So I only had the drums on 2 tracks, so only 2 microphones, believe it or not, were used away from the drum kit, just 2 stereo pair. That's how the drums were recorded on that record. And I took one of them and put it into the phaser and recorded it on a 3rd track and played it to them when we had the playback, and they liked it and kept it. And so, you know, it was just a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was just I was just experimenting. It wasn't
And they loved it.
thought out. Just worked out. One of those happy mistakes.
Wow. I love the song too. Trampled. Is it Trampled Underfoot? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
That song is, and the sound with that, the beginning, especially like that, dun, 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 that's so, it sounds like
that's a clavinet.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah.
He played what Jonesy would do is he would play the clavinet a lot of times to get the feel on the drum tracks, and then we'd overdub the bass.
Okay.
So I think that particular song, because it starts out with that, I think that that's the way we did that. But hey, that's 1970.
So when Robert Plant sings, does he do it like in one take, or does he do it multiple? Because I mean, his vocals are just, nobody can duplicate that. He's one of the greatest rock singers of all time.
Indeed. I've been lucky to kind of work with some great singers like Plant and Paul Rodgers, for Christ's sake, and Streisand and Mickey Thomas and Ann Wilson. You know, I really have had a great career as far as working with the best singers.
Yeah. So, but Plant, does he do it in one take typically, or how many? Does it take him a lot? Is he a perfectionist?
You know, when I did those 9 songs, I didn't even know that they were going to use tracks from Houses of the Holy and make it a whole album. I just did the 9 newest songs.
Okay.
I didn't do the final vocals, so I'm not sure how we did that.
Okay. So with that one and the 3 Bad Companies that you also engineered, now those got remastered later. So explain that process. Does that negate the work that you did, or does it just enhance it?
Maybe not. Maybe not. Just it's you know, remastering and remixing are 2 different things. Remastering, they send it to a mastering engineer, and they use some, maybe these days, computer programs to change the EQ and all that. Remixing is where you get the original audio tapes. Some, you know, usually in those days it was all 16 track or 24 track, and actually physically remix it. And so both of these things are done throughout the industry as time goes on. Techniques get better, equipment gets better, and tastes change and how things sound.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I must say that I talked to Pete Townsend about, it's probably about 8 or 10 years ago now, when the 40th anniversary of Quadrophenia came out. And he sent me a 40th anniversary package that they had done, a vinyl package. And he told me they used all the original mixes that he and I did. Pete and I did the mixing together at his studio in Goring, which is out like a bungalow outside of London.
Wow. So then your first producer credit is the Thin Lizzy one, right? Nightlife? Is that the first producing credit? And you're kind of...
I did one before that called Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers that I had done with the Airstream in a barn in Cornwall. It was a pub band signed to Charisma Records. But yeah, Nightlife with Thin Lizzy is one of the first ones that I did while I was still in London. Yeah.
And you thought the production, you did a good job, but you wish you could redo the mixing. Is that the problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the band felt the same way?
Oh, I don't know. Listening to it now, I go, you know, sometimes I listen to stuff, I go, yeah. Sometimes I listen to stuff, I go, no.
Well, yeah. And then so the UFO,
we can do it better, you know.
Yeah. The UFO Strangers in the Night, that's another big one. Now that's a live album, but I did hear you say that 2 songs were actually recorded in studio, and there was some disagreement with the guitarist, Michael Schenker, because he wanted it to be more produced and you wanted it more of a live feel. Isn't that right?
You know, I don't remember that part. Actually, to tell you the truth, I've read things like that too. I do know that, you know, it's a live album with a band like that is very difficult especially when you have songs that are like 13 minutes long, like Rock Bottom, and you have a 20-minute side. We're talking about, this is 1977. We're talking about vinyl. This is before CDs. And so you can't do the set as the set, would normally be. You have to figure out, where am I going to put something like Rock Bottom or Love to Love, which are like, so long. And so there's no way we could do an album that was listenable on a single vinyl. So I talked Chris into doing a double album. And it was my judgment that there was a couple of songs short of the performance-wise. So we just went in and we did them in the studio. And just threw them in there with, I didn't, the biggest venue on that album was, I think, Chicago Amphitheater. UFO had a huge following in Chicago. But I think I used most of the recording from like Columbus or Youngstown or something like that. But I used all the audience from Chicago.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I was using the audience anyway. So I used the audience from the record plant studio, or, I used the audience on the record plant tracks. I used the same drums and same microphones and the same everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so Michael must not have been that mad, because he had you produce his solo album, the 1981 Michael Schenker Group. So what was it like working with him? Because I had the basis of the current version of UFO, and he said there's no interest in reconnecting with Michael. They don't want him in the band. Is there some sort of, was he difficult to work with or something? Or what's your take on that?
Oh boy. Michael was, it was an English rock band with a German guitar player. And there was a little bit of friction there, left over from the war even, I think.
Really?
Honestly. Well,
okay.
They made fun of each other, and Michael didn't like that. Now, Michael wrote these really thematic, episodic things, but they were just themes. They weren't chopped up into a song. And so one of the things that I had to do, because they didn't rehearse together, he'd turn up with these epic, great, wonderful pieces of music, but they weren't songs. And so I chopped them up, and Phil Mogg would take them the whole album to write the lyrics. It was like, we're getting to the end. Where are their lyrics? Now, as a producer, it's tough to do an album with songs and you don't know what they're about.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the lyrics, right?
Right.
So that was one thing, but he was quirky, Michael. He was such a genius. I had no issues working with Michael. We loved it working together. I did the 2 studio albums, Obsession and Lights Out. Then I did the live album, Strangers in the Night, which, when I was mixing that album at the record plant in LA, I went next door to have lunch at this French restaurant, and they were playing Doobie Doobie Doo, Stranger in the Night.
Frank Sinatra, yeah.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra was on the, and I was listening to it while I was eating lunch, and I went, that would be a great name for this album, UFO, Strangers in the Night. And so that band loved that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then you go,
and I did that, and then I did 2 Schenker solo records.
Right.
Then I did another UFO record. So I've done 6 records with Schenker.
Yeah. So he must have appreciated your production skills for sure.
He brought me to, in mid-90s, he brought me to Phoenix, and I rented a place in Scottsdale and rented a studio. And he had this, I think it was a Walk on Water album. That was pretty cool. So
okay.
In the mid-90s, that's the last time I worked with him, I think.
Okay.
I did another UFO album in LA. Can't remember the name of that.
Yeah, you worked with them a lot.
I did. Yeah, six records. Yeah.
Yeah. They have kind of a cult following.
they do.
I know like Eddie Trunk is a big fan, and he's kind of championed them as one of the greatest rock bands. He's a huge fan.
Yeah, big fan.
Yeah. So then you do some of the pop stuff like Jefferson Starship or I can't remember. Did you do all three incarnations? Did you Airplane, Starship, and Jefferson Starship, or?
Well, I did the Airplane. Well, here's an interesting story. I was doing one of the tours that I did when I was with Festival Group as the sound man. One of the tours that I did a couple of tours with Jefferson Airplane. So, and I actually mixed their sound at Woodstock. So
Wow.
I was on tour with them, 2 tours, 3 tours in 68, 69. I got a call in 79. My manager said that they've got a new singer, Mickey Thomas from Fooled Around and Fell in Love fame. And I said, oh, great. And so I went up to see them. I actually saw Santana the same day. They were looking for a producer too. But I ended up going with the Starship. They had Ainsley Dunbar, new drummer, and Mickey was just, it wasn't the Starship of old. It certainly wasn't the Airplane. And they had that song Jane. And so it was a new beginning for them. And I ended up doing 3 records with them in the Bay Area over the next 3 years or so. But
did you like?
I have to make a point that I was afraid when I went up there that they wouldn't want to hire their sound guy to be their producer. Right? This famous guy is coming up now that's done all these records, and so I didn't tell them, and they didn't recognize me because I didn't have a beard and all of that. But somewhere like in the second or the third records, I'm sitting around with the roadies, and they're going, "You're from Philly, right?" And I went, "Yeah." "Oh, you were on tour with us, weren't you?"
It took them that long to remember that?
3 years, yeah.
That's funny.
I just didn't mention it, and they didn't mention it. That happened to me too with in 1985. I got a call to do Joe Cocker, and I was the mixer for Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour in 69 or 68, whenever that was. And so, but I didn't have to worry about, Joe didn't remember anything,
Yeah.
So
do you like the poppier stuff like that, like the Starship and Survivor, and then the albums you did with Heart were more poppy, or do you like the more hard rocking stuff, like you did the Ozzy Osbourne and Kiss and those kinds of things?
I don't know what I liked and what I didn't like. I think that as a producer, you have to make sure that you do an album that can fit the formats that you can get on the radio. There's certain rock songs that will work with album radio, AOR. And in those days, especially the 80s, there was CHR, Contemporary Hit Radio, CHR, which is really top 40 kind of radio. And they were not going to play Kiss ever, although I tried. But they would play ballads. And so These Dreams, Alone, that kind of thing. If you get a hit in those days on AOR, you could have a gold record. You could sell
right.
$1 million. If you get it on CHR, you got 2 million.
Yeah. So like with the Ozzy one.
So Ozzy, Shot in the Dark.
Yeah, you had to talk them into doing that, right?
I did. I had to talk them in. Then they wanted to know where the follow-up was. And I laughed. I said, "You kidding? Do you remember the conversation we had about this? You didn't want to do this one. How could I possibly sneak in a follow-up?"
But did you have other suggestions that you would have told them to follow it up with?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But Phil Susan played me this song, and he was the bass player in the group. I didn't have to look too far for this song. I thought it would be great, but they didn't like it.
Was he
I talked him into it.
Did you think he was was he the main songwriter of that album then, or did he write most of the songs? Or because I know it says like Ozzy and
Ozzy took credit for all of the songs all the time. how much he actually wrote, I wasn't party to, because I wasn't there for the writing sessions.
Hmm.
I just know that he always had great people. Ozzy. He had, during the album that I did, he had um, uh, Jakey Lee,
Yeah.
and he was fabulous, and he was a great guy. He did.
Didn't he want to work at like?
He did say to me he wanted to work at midnight,
Yeah.
and I went to. Excuse me. I went. The Townhouse Studios. We can't turn the whole thing over.
Right. So you compromised, and he came in at like 8 o'clock at night or something like that.
6. Worked till 2.
6. Okay. Yeah. So that's early for him.
Yeah. And he wasn't, he was just into martial arts and stuff. He just was a night guy.
Interesting.
As a producer, you have to kind of like go with when people are going to be their most talented. But I couldn't go at midnight. That was a bit too much.
Yeah. So with the Kiss one, there's a songwriting team of, Paul and Gene. Do they write separately? Like Paul sends you 6 songs, but you said that he had, narrowed it down to these are the 6 best, where Gene just sent you everything. It was like 25 songs.
That's right. Yeah. Gene just sends everything he's done. And Paul had narrowed it down, and Paul wrote with other people. I think Gene did a little bit too. Paul wrote with, a lot of the hot hit writers. And I had a great time with them. That was a terrific record, I think. Listening back to it, that's another one I wish I could remix. Because of the days of synth. It's a little bit, too synth heavy. Just as far as mixing goes, I would have it rock more. And but we were trying to get them on hit radio too.
Yeah.
And so they wouldn't. I thought the record company really messed that up. There was a song called "Reason to Live" that I thought was a hit smash. Really, it's on that record, and we couldn't get traction on it.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah. Like, so what happens to those demos? Like, I heard you say one of the songs Gene wrote was called "I Want to Put a Log in Your Fireplace," and I thought that was hilarious. And I tried to YouTube like Kiss demo. I can't find it.
Oh, well, who knows what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I. Yeah. But that's rock and roll.
Because there's some Kiss fans that, they will like pay money for Gene Simmons' log. They let alone a demo song that he did like that. Like they're so into that stuff.
The Kiss Army is really, the Kiss Army has had mostly negative reviews of Crazy Nights album.
But they still play the song Crazy Nights, right?
Yeah, it's just like there's certain things that happen, like when Dylan went electric. It seemed preposterous now, but add a synth to Kiss was not something that, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, everyone was using synth in the 80s.
That's what it was, the way it was.
Yeah. So I had Key Marcello from Europe on my show, and he was telling me the story about how you guys had the album Out of This World, that you brought him this song by Diane Warren called Look Away. And he's so excited. He's like, guys, look at this song. It's called Look Away. It's Diane. We got a Diane Warren song. And who was it? Was it the singer or somebody else said, or I think it was John, the other guitarist, said, no, we're not a fucking cover band. And so they turned it down. And then it went on to be this massive hit for Chicago.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
That's not true?
No, I'll tell you the truth of it.
Okay.
I was going to London. I was given 2 Diane Warren songs that Chicago had given me to do with them.
Okay.
I never offered those songs to Europe. I was on my way to London to do the Out of This World album, and I played them those songs. But I never suggested, they weren't my songs to give. I never suggested. I went back after that and cut those songs with Chicago, and they became hits, both of them.
So Key was just confused then.
Yeah, he doesn't remember. He was impressed with the songs.
Okay,
but
do you think if he would have fought for him,
doing outside songs, they didn't need outside songs. The dilemma with Europe was they had a big hit with ba 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 bum ba 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 ba. How do you follow that up? Give me another, give me another trumpet riff. Give me another horn riff.
Yeah.
That's
They
the,
needed a ballad. I think maybe if not Look Away, maybe another ballad from.
I mean, there's a lot of, there's ballads on that record, and the song Superstitious did fairly well. It didn't do what Final Countdown did, but
Yeah.
it's a great album, and there's wonderful, I mean, it was a great record, I think.
Underrated for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So how do those songs like the Diane Warren song, how do those songs by other songwriters get picked for albums? Is there a bidding war or competition, or do the songwriters say, I want this to go to Chicago, or how does that work?
Well, you know, as a producer, a hit producer especially, you are a conduit for all of these songwriters. You know, it passes through me. You know, either I find the songs or the record company. You know, in the case of like Heart, I sat with Don Grierson, who's the head of A&R at Capitol, and he had "What About Love," right, which is a great song.
Yeah.
And he also was having hits with Tina Turner, and he had this song called "If Looks Could Kill," and it was like a dance tune. If looks could kill, ding, 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 ding. And I thought lyrically, if looks could kill, you'd be lying on the floor, you'd be begging me, please don't hurt me no more. I thought that would be great for Ann Wilson as a visual, right? And so I grabbed that from him. I said, well, I want to do this with Heart. And then I went and found These Dreams for them, and Alone, and I Want You So Bad, and some other songs, and along mix those in with the songs that they wrote. So, you know, finding outside songs is sometimes just I got inundated with so many songs in the 80s that I couldn't really listen to them all. So I only listened when I had an artist in mind, when I was looking for something, trying to fill a gap for an artist.
Yeah, interesting.
So because otherwise I'd miss it, you know, or I'd forget about it. So
Okay.
So I had lots of stuff, and I just start, you know, I'd first start digging into known songwriters like Diane, Holly
Bernie Taupin.
Knight, Bernie. Well, Bernie and I were in the same management company, so I knew Bernie really well. Bernie's the one that handed me a cassette that had These Dreams on it. But also on that cassette, because I was going up to rehearse with Heart, on that cassette was We Built This City.
And you said you hated that one, right?
Yeah. I didn't like that song. I thought it was too pretentious.
You know? So with Ann Wilson, though, tell me about that, because I had her on
These Dreams they loved.
Yeah, because I know she's not a huge fan of that era of the band, but what was she like working with? Because I had her on the show, and I just really liked her. I was like, gosh, she seems so humble. Was she humble even back in the day in her prime?
Oh yeah, for both of them were great. You know, I think that some of the songs I didn't agree with that were pushed by the record company, like Nothing at All is one of them that comes to mind. That but I did them. You know, I had a mandate to do them. The songs "What About Love," "These Dreams," "Alone," I think they still do those, and I think they're still great. And they certainly built that era. That they sold, I don't know how many records, 10 million records or something like that, or maybe more. That's just in the U.S. between those two records. And
yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I like those songs. I know she's not. They're not a huge fan of that era, but I mean, because that was when I grew up as a kid, and I was like, oh, these are catchy, fun songs.
They came out of the 70s with the Dreamboat Annie album.
Yeah,
which that's
a classic.
Great classic. You know, dun do 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 do, Crazy on You, and Magic Man, and Barracuda, and you know, unfortunately, the guitar player, they were like had relationships with the guitar player and the drummer, And when they broke up, I think that took away a lot of the writing in the band for and they started, that changed the band. And by 1982, they had an album called Passion Works, and it didn't do well. And Epic dropped them, if you can imagine that. They got dropped
Yeah.
from Epic. And they were a little bit, they needed to kind of like get perked back up. And, they had to agree with Don Gerson, the record company guy, that if he signed them, they would have to agree to do songs and agree on the producer. And they said yes, and that's how it all came down. But I don't think they ever wanted to do anybody else's songs.
Yeah.
Some people,
well, that makes sense.
Some artists are more agreeable to doing covers, like a Rod Stewart, or like, they're not so, but the girls are never happy with doing songs. But I had a great time with them. And in fact, I have to tell you this. After the Damn Yankees record, and Nancy called me up. I had given him this song, "Want You So Bad," by the same writers that that did "Alone," Tom Kelly and Billy Steinberg. And I think it was "Want You So Bad," or it was another song like that. And she called me up. She said, "Remember that song that, I want to do that for this thing I'm doing with my boyfriend or husband." I wasn't quite sure if she had married her boyfriend or husband at that time. And I said, "I'm sorry, but I gave that away I'm doing that with Patti Smythe." And they didn't like that.
Oh, shit.
And I didn't do the next record. They got, that's okay. Well, let's get, what's his name to do the next record.
Oh.
There's no reason why I shouldn't do the third record that they did.
Yeah, because those two that you did were, say what you will, but they're massive success.
Yeah. So here you go. Them complaining about outside songs. And then when she wants to do an outside song that I played her, I said, "Well, now I'm doing it with somebody else after you turned it down." Go figure.
Go figure, yeah. Well, you mentioned Damn Yankees. I got to talk about that because to me, I think those are two of the most underrated, brilliant rock records. I know rock scene was changing a little bit, especially with the second album, but I love those records. So tell me about that, because I had Ted Nugent on my show, and that guy is just, he's so energetic, and he's 70 years old. Was he bouncing off the walls in the studio too? I know you said something about how he wasn't around for a lot of it, but when he was there, was he crazy?
Well, Ted is very entertaining.
Yeah.
Ted is like a preacher on meth. Now, I have to say that I don't want this to be misconstrued. He doesn't do drugs. He's not a drug.
No, that's what's so funny.
Yeah,
how is he so energetic?
Yeah, he is like that. There is this backstory to Damn Yankees. It's interesting. John Kolodner, kind of a really famous A&R guy,
with a beard.
Yeah,
dude looks like a lady video.
Right. He always in a white coat. Has to, it helped Aerosmith, and he was around the scene. He was working for Geffen, and he got Ted together with Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades. He's the one that put that together. And they did
brilliant.
Those that were great, and it was a great mixture of talent. However, I'm trying to think of the name of the president of Geffen Records at the time. It doesn't matter. He passed on the project. And so imagine after putting that together, he didn't want to do it. Okay. So it went to Warner Brothers, and Michael Austin called me up and said, "Get down here. I want you to hear this." And he played me the, six songs that they had worked up. And I said, "I want to do it." But at the same time, I was worried because I had told Night Ranger's manager that I would do a Night Ranger album, and I passed on it and left them hanging a couple of years earlier in '87, I think, something like that. I did something else, and I felt bad about it, but I can only do so many projects, and I felt bad about it. I thought that maybe Jack Blades would, you know, not be happy about that.
Hold a grudge, but he didn't.
No, he didn't.
Oh, that's good.
So,
Yeah, I'm sure that kind of stuff happens all the time.
He came. I invited him over to my house and smoothed things over with him, and we started getting down to work. Man, it was.
He is one of the most brilliant songwriters, I think. Totally underrated. I mean, Night Ranger stuff that they do today, I listen, I go, this is a great song. I mean, obviously they're not going to play it on the radio because whatever,
writer.
but
Hit writer, him and Tommy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had mentioned something about, oh gosh, I forget now. You know, originally when you first started talking about Damn Yankees.
well, how Nugent would, you said Tommy would come in and be in the studio all day. Nugent would come in and do his parts and leave.
Ted was in Ted's world, what we called it. You know, his bow hunting paradise. And
He shot a bow on my podcast. He was shooting the bow and arrow.
Well, look, Damn Yankees was Ted Nugent's road show and Tommy Shaw and Jack Blade's studio album.
That makes sense.
And Ted Nugent used to shoot a bow and arrow on stage at Saddam Hussein. They would bring out a thing of Saddam Hussein and he would fire and the crowd would go crazy. Ted hasn't changed much.
No, I don't think I knew back then though, like how political he was, or I don't know if he's changed. No.
Well, I certainly I love the guy. He's a really entertaining guy, but
he's entertaining.
His politics are not my politics.
Yeah.
But if you look at the songs on the second Damn Yankees record, you know, and I have a platinum disc in my bathroom, so whenever I'm standing there at the toilet, I can read it. And the songs on there are Uprising, Don't Tread on Me. If you think about, you know,
Yeah,
he was writing about that stuff then. It's just that, you know, that's the meaning. I just thought it was rock and roll to him.
it's more subtle back then.
Way different for him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that, especially that second album. The production, the songwriting, all of it. The songs it's just good. It's good stuff. Great rock.
It's easy to work with guys like that. Here's the thing that I'm getting back to about working with him, and in Ted's world, he just wanted to come and do everything at once. Now, when I first got this project, I went, wow, I love to have the two guitar player thing.
Right.
They play off each other. Well, you can't play off each other if they're not playing at the same time, can you?
Yeah.
And so Tommy did most of the guitars, and Ted was really, really important. He wrote the riff on Coming of Age, which is very cool. And so he did some very important stuff. He didn't do as much as I would have liked him to because he chose not to. He chose to stay. He came and did his rhythm parts and then left. So there's little other parts that crop up that Tommy did all those little parts. When he came back to do the solos 6 weeks later, usually as a producer, you have to be ready with the record button to hit that button because you might get the best solo that you'd ever gotten right then, first time. I hit the record button. He didn't remember the song. He had to figure out what key it was in. He did no homework. However, he's Ted fucking Nugent. So he can go in and do that. And in a half an hour, he had a great solo. But that was the way he worked. I can do that. I don't need to rehearse. I'm Ted Nugent.
That's interesting. That's funny. And
so,
did you?
Yeah, he did. So he can't complain about not having enough airtime on the album because he didn't put in the time.
Right. Now you didn't do the third album that never came out, did you?
I didn't.
No. Okay. What about now? This is the one of you. I think one of your best albums. One of my favorite is the Vince Neil record. I think that's so underrated. I loved crew. That was when I
Yeah.
first started getting into music.
I never, you know,
I love that album. It's, I mean, yeah, it's not groundbreaking. I know it came out during grunge, but it was so fun. It was just a fun, good album. The guitar work, and I think I had Steve Stevens on, and even he didn't even seem to be very thrilled about it. I was like, "That's your best guitar work I've ever heard." He's shredding, and it's got these lasers and all this stuff, but he doesn't seem very happy with it.
I didn't, you know, no one's ever asked me about that record. I thoroughly agree that Nirvana tanked it. You know, the fact that everybody was running up to Seattle and that all eyes were up there with not just Nirvana but Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and everybody else. But he had a great band. He had a great band, and very cool songs. I had Tommy and Jack write a song for him.
2, I think, right?
Maybe 2. Yeah,
because they did the "You're Invited but Your Friend Can't Come" and also "Can't
Right.
Change Me."
That's right. Wow.
And also, did they do "Sister of Pain" too? Maybe 3 songs.
Yeah, maybe 3. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was a great sounding record.
Yeah, the flamenco guitar on the edge is so cool. You know, he also does the acoustic stuff.
To have a guy like him and him not to recognize that as a great album is kind of strange.
It is weird. So
I just wrote it off as, you know, it wasn't the time for that kind of record, because I did another really good record with John Wetton at the time, the singer for Asia, right around 93 or 94, 90, whatever it was. It didn't get any notice either, and I just wrote those off as you know, classic rock was not in the mainstream anymore.
Yeah, but I think the fans, like Vince fans, are still hold that record near and dear.
Yeah.
And yeah, so at the time, did you ever just, like, after recording, go out with Vince for a beer? Did he ever spill the dirt on the crew stuff? Like, what? Because there's just 2 different stories to that whole saga.
To what saga?
To the Motley, you know, he said he was fired, and then they said he quit.
Oh,
did he ever tell you his take on it?
I don't know. I just know that Tommy and Jack Blades took Vince under his wing when he left Motley. That's how that MTV thing came about. You're invited, your friends can't come. Yeah. And it was just a fun record. I remember when we finished the tracks, we recorded at Rumbo in LA. We recorded the tracks. All of a sudden, we had a little party at the end of just the track recording, the drum recording, and in walks this stripper with this big guy, like 6'10" guy, holding a boombox, and yeah. She started stripping and put with music, and after about a half hour, I decided to go home. And about midnight, I get a call from the girl at the studio. Ron, somebody at the studio hit the fire alarm.
Oh God!
So they had gotten out of hand, gotten crazy, and they were hitting fire alarms, and so I got chewed out for not being there for that, you know.
Are you sometimes kind of like a babysitter as a producer with these rock stars?
I'm the guy that books the studios and has the relationships with the studios. And yeah, sometimes, yeah, I remember in Air Studios in London, I did a Faces album, which never came out because they broke up. But I remember being called into the office by none other than the Beatles producer and wanting to know why a bar was set up in the control room. You know, he wanted to make sure that didn't happen again.
So Rod Stewart set up a bar in this?
The Faces, you know, they're just drinkers.
Okay.
But,
so who was the craziest? I mean, because Keith Moon, John Bonham, Vince Neil, who's the craziest person to control, the biggest partier of all the bands you worked with?
All of them.
Oh. Really?
I can't really, you know, there's, you know, all of them partied hard at some point. That's not a word. Continuously, I think, I'm not sure, maybe Vince.
Really? So even in '93, he was still, because like remember they had kind of Motley Crue had been sober for like a couple of
Now,
years.
I have to tell you that I had more trouble getting Steve Stevens to the studio than anybody else.
Really?
Because he was just late all the time.
Yeah. I think he's sober now. I think he's
Yeah.
been sober for like.
He was a little out of control, but he was still playing great for sure.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was the cocaine that made him sound so crazy on that album.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he's like looks back on it and.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah. What about this is another thing. I think this was amazing because we talk about these albums, the classic rock kind of dying. But in 1995, you made an album for Firehouse and you got them a not only top 40, but top 30 pop hit. That's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, those guys were great.
It was the song "I Live My Life for You." It actually hit number 26, which is again, I think that's amazing in 1995 for a quote unquote hair band to have a radio friendly hit. How was there some magic you had to work on that song, or was it just a great song that you just?
I'm so happy that you're asking about these '90s projects because I never get asked about these '90s projects.
These are my favorite.
Like Vince or like like Firehouse or a couple of years later, Meatloaf. I did a Meatloaf record in '95. I remember going down to Sarasota and rehearsing with the band. Then I brought them to LA, I believe. And I'm not sure where I did the album, but I love those guys. I remember thinking that in those days, I had to dry things up a little bit from the reverb from the 80s. Everything was more in your face. So the mixing is quite different.
Mm.
But I didn't want to change the band. And maybe sonically, like I said, listening back, I would sonically like to have remixed Thin Lizzy and Kiss, but not change anything necessarily.
Yeah. So you got to tell me this about Mike Clink. Now you kind of mentored him. I was not aware of this. Now he obviously went on to be a massive producer for Guns N' Roses and some other stuff. But how did you start? Was it Eye of the Tiger or did he produced that? Or tell me the story with him. I'll get a drink too here. It was just water, but hey.
Well, here's the story that you should know. I built a studio for Ronnie Wood, who was just about to leave the Faces at his house in London. And the Faces were breaking up. And Warner's needed another album from the Faces. This is before Rod Stewart went solo. Hmm. And even though he had a solo album with Maggie May, which is a huge hit, that's one of the reasons why he wanted to break away from the band.
Sure.
And so I built a studio for Woody, and the Record Plant Studios were hired to record the tour that they were doing in the U.S. During that recording, Ronnie Wood told the two owners of the record plant, "Hey, why don't you come to London during the hiatus?" Yeah, it's like because they recorded 3 weeks, and there's a couple of weeks off, and then another 3 weeks or something. So Gary Kellgren and Chris Stone came to London, and I was doing a session at Woody's house, right? And they met me, and they saw that I had done Led Zeppelin and The Who and Bad Company, and this was 1975, and they offered me the job for chief engineer at the record plant. And ultimately, I took it and went to LA and was kind of the overseer of the 5 studios, the 3 in LA and the 2 up in Sausalito. Mike Clink was an assistant engineer at that time at the record plant. Maybe not then, but eventually he was. I mean, I'm not sure when I got there in 75 if he was working or not. He would remember. But he started working at the record plant, and we started working together, and I liked him and he liked me, and I used him for like 8 albums or something. We went to Sausalito together. There's a lot of times I'd do pieces in LA and then go up to Sausalito with I'd maybe like Survivor. I'd cut the drums in LA and then go up there and do the overdubs because they had a house with the studio. So Clink ended up being, I'm not sure I mentored him so much as he was my assistant engineer. And I even got my manager to kind of manage him. I'm not sure if that's what resulted in him getting the gig for Guns N' Roses, but certainly that changed his life.
Yeah. Do you still keep in touch with him?
Oh, yeah. I did.
Yeah. That you guys trade stories?
I was working with Hart or somebody in the big studio at Rumbo, and he had those guys in the back in the smaller studio. And I remember meeting those guys and thinking, "Good luck, Mike."
Yeah, because they were pretty crazy back in the day. On that first, I mean, there was a lot of drugs, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah. So, yeah.
Guns N' Roses. Yeah, wow. It's just like so commonplace for you to just see all these bands, and then some of them later just take off. I'm sure there was a lot that never did, but so many of them you probably saw. Yeah, you're thinking good luck with those guys, and the album blows up. You had no idea.
Another guy that worked for me a few albums, Toby Wright, went on to work with Alice in Chains, and in fact, he's got a podcast. I did a session with him, a podcast called.
Which one's his call? I've listened to a few interviews. I'm trying to remember.
It's
not sure if I heard that one.
Toby Wright. It's right, the right stuff or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I might have heard that one. Now I heard you say in one of the interviews or multiple interviews, you talk about this book. What's the status with that?
I haven't done anything. COVID kind of stopped that in its tracks. So it was
okay.
And one of the reasons is everybody started writing books. Everybody was sitting on their butt.
Yeah.
And trying to stay away from getting sick and starting to think, let me paint something, or let me write something, or let me record something. So I have to get back to it. It's from the early days to 1999. Goes right up to there. I haven't included anything, and I haven't included anything personal. It's just all career stuff at the moment. But yeah, I'm going to get back to it.
Well, it's an amazing career. It's a great story. I just love too that it starts, this guy making $35 an hour, and then you become one of the biggest producers in the world. I love those kinds of stories. It's really neat and inspiring for people to hear that, I think, whether they want to be a producer or anything.
Yeah.
You have any secrets to your success? Like, did you see that path later down the line? You're like, I'm going to be a huge producer.
I have to say that as an engineer, for instance, let's take the Bad Company albums.
Love those.
I was an engineer. I get paid $100 a week.
That's it?
During that time, maybe $200 a week. And I watched them rake in millions over 3 albums. The third album, they couldn't even work in England because they could only be there 63 days a year because of their tax issues that they'd have.
Oh.
They didn't want to record in the US because they didn't want to use up visa time because they were on tour.
Oh, right.
And so they decided to record in the south of France. They rented a big villa, and Ronnie Lane wouldn't let them take the Airstream. The first 2 albums I had done with the Airstream thing that we talked about.
Yeah.
So I got the Rolling Stones mobile truck to come over, and the reason I'm bringing all that up is, I started thinking, man, I need to be a royalty artist here. I'm, right in the middle of all this, and so, started producing and became a royalty artist, and that's how you make money in this business. Not sitting there as an engineer getting an hourly or weekly wage.
Right. So you did see the future. You saw, I need to take this up a notch. Because do some people just stay engineers?
I guess if they're not aspiring or if they don't have the talent, I don't think that it's not, you can say you're going to be a producer, but you have to know what you're doing, and you have to have hits, and you have to kind of So
Yeah. Well, it's great. It was a lot of great stories. Anything else I missed? Any other crazy stories or gossip or dirt you want to spill on here?
a couple of hours that we could do.
Well, you'll have to come back when the book's out and we can promote that. And that's been a lot of fun.
That's been great. Yeah.
Okay. I always end with a charity. Is there a charity you want to promote?
Yeah. Doctors Without Borders.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put that. I've heard of that one. Yeah, I'll put the website.
You know, I got involved with them during the Ebola times back in 7 years ago or something. And yeah, so yeah.
Okay.
Doctors Without Borders.
I'll put that website in the notes along with you have a website and people can contact you if they want to hire you or
Nevison.com.
Yeah.
Where they can hire me through SoundBetter. I have a profile on SoundBetter too.
Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I love the stories.
Good talking with you.
All right. You too. Be in touch.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you again to Ron Nevison. Check out his website for more information, or you can check All Music for a list of his full credits. It's a pretty extensive list, and we could definitely do a round 2 for this one. So I hope to read his book one day and have him back on the show. Make sure to support Ron, share this episode, or follow him on social media. Thank you for all your support of the guests. If you want to support me and my little show here, you can like, comment, share the episode, listen to some of my other episodes, including the ones I mentioned, like Steve Stevens, Ann Wilson, and Ted Nugent. Thank you so much for making it all the way through this episode. Have a great day and shoot for the moon.